welcome everyone to Lightning Friday, our Lightning Network extravaganza, where everyone asks questions and we, try to answer them. Uh, how's everyone doing today? With us today, we have Evan Kalutis, if I don't stutter up a storm here, and we have Justifer. Evan is from Zeus Wallet, and Justifer is from Ambos Lightning Explorer, and I am the host of Lightning Junkies Chat. How are you guys all doing today?
Good, good. Chaz, excited to be back for another week of talking about Lightning Network.
I hope you guys thought up something to say.
Oh yeah, oh yeah, a
Yeah,
lot to talk about. How about you, Justifer? How are you doing?
doing great. Just finished moving. Go living the digital nomad life, trying to figure out a way to make my node a mobile node. So that'll be a fun project to figure out. Thanks so much for hosting, Chaz. It's really appreciated, and always a fun part of my week to get to do this with you all.
Hell yeah. So let's talk more about your mobile node setup. You got some challenges there ahead of you. It sounds like.
Yeah, certainly. I think about 3 or 4 people messaged me, letting me know that my node it was like offline. But I was thinking about maybe moving it over to Voltage. That's like a cloud hosted Lightning node solution. So it wouldn't, it's of course like not your hardware, but definitely like a solution for like taking a node on the run. I don't know if there's other ideas that people had to like actually take hardware with you as you travel.
Now, of course, the network connectivity is going to be the biggest thing. But how about power? Is this going to be an issue for you? Are you thinking about having like mobile battery or?
I was walking around with a UPS for a little bit.
Just unplugged, just walking around with it. Fill people in on what a UPS is for those who are not into the weeds of things right here.
Yeah, it's an uninterruptible power supply. So what it does is like if your power goes out for any reason, like it is perfectly prepared to actually like flip on and uninterrupted power. So it like one let's see whenever you have a power outage, that can really mess up your SD card that's like in lots of the Raspi Blitz or the Raspberry Pi based nodes with all your firmware on there, and those are pretty sensitive. So whenever you have a power failure, you'll I've become pretty familiar with that whole troubleshooting process where I'm spending time in the different like Raspi Blitz Telegram chats trying to get support and figuring out what these bugs mean, because it's pretty unpredictable what type of bugs will pop up.
Yeah, for sure. Power reliability is a really big part. So yeah, UPS, it's a great object to have in your stack, even if you're just looking for more uptime at home. Definitely helps with the power outages. You might want to run your router and your modem through there too, and you get a little more reliability. But yeah, it's funny to hear you're using it on the go and trying to keep things running. I know you got a pretty good routing reputation. Yeah, man. I just hope your BOS score isn't affected after switching up your networking. But
It definitely will
probably
be.
will. Yeah, almost definitely. Yeah. um, cool. So,
Well,
sorry. Go
like
ahead.
actually, just while I was in Miami, just having like Zeus running on my phone was really awesome because I didn't take my node with me to Miami. Um, but but yeah, just being able to like be on the go and still access your node is like super important. And doing that via Tor was really cool.
Yeah, it's always fun taking it on on the road. Had a little bit of spotty Tor connectivity. Had to fall back on some mainnet stuff, but when it does work, it feels incredibly powerful. So. So topics this week, guys. You guys want to kick off into any big news items you guys saw this week? I think I got a couple in mind, but nothing super crazy. What do you guys think?
I'm kind of holding my breath for the difficulty adjustment because I think that'll be really, really fast blocks, and we should be able to open tons of channels. So I'm kind of like picking, some peers that I might want to open channels with for this next epoch.
Word. So the difficulty readjustment should be tonight, right? We're like, what do we got to be like 40 something blocks away? Less?
I'll have to check.
Anyway, yeah, I feel like it's this evening for us in the western side of the globe. But yeah, it's coming up. It's been a crazy couple of weeks where we had the miners in Shenzhen, China, a vast majority of them, it seems like, forced off. Obviously, there's definitely some state-sponsored miners or people just in with the government that are probably still doing it in China. But yeah, we saw it was our greatest downward difficulty adjustment. And pull up mempool.space and see if we could get an exact figure on that. Minus 27 3/4. Wow.
Wow. Yeah, we're 39 blocks away from that difficulty adjustment. So that'll be.
Yeah, it makes sense. Yeah, so this is going to be crazy. So blocks are coming in somewhat infrequently now, right? We've seen some bigger gaps than the 10-minute average we should see. And yeah, with this adjustment in this 2-week period, every 2-week period of blocks is called an epoch. And in that period, at the end of it, we get a difficulty readjustment. And as a result, the difficulty algorithm is going to adjust so that with less miners on the network, the rate at which the blocks come out should be back to about 10 minutes. So as this is happening, there's going to be more blocks out there, more transactions processed at a quicker pace. And yeah, hopefully we can bring those fees down to, a good 1 sat, 2 sat per VByte would be nice. Currently, I'm looking at mempool. These are pretty high right now. The low priority is at 76. That is at 85, and the last block had transactions ranging from 84 to 475. Wow. Sats per VByte right there. So yeah, we direly need this one, and hopefully this facilitates all that on-chain activity that we need, or channel closes or channel opens, and hopefully a bunch of coin joins. So let's see how that shakes out.
Yeah, what about you, Chaz? Anything this week that's stood out, or any topics that come immediately to mind before we take some questions and bring some other folks up on stage?
Not really. Like the biggest thing on my mind on the Lightning Network side is I had an interview with Christian Decker last Friday, and that conversation's still kind of bouncing around my head. I think I mentioned it last week too. Mm-hmm. But it's like the big part of that conversation was, channel factories. And I think I even jumped in on Shinobi's chat where he was talking about state chains and such, and kind of went in on channel factories more. But I think the whole idea of channel factories is kind of on my mind lately. L2 any prev out are, my favorite things on the podcast currently. And so trying to wrap my mind around channel factories and actually trying to think through the complexity of that, I think, is a is a very big deal that's kind of underestimated going forward. Like right now we have, you guys are very well aware of the complexity around routing and all that.
Mhm.
I think we're going to have a different kind of complexity when it comes to channel factories, because like we heard a lot of FUD when we went from Bitcoin to the Lightning Network, that it was super duper complex and all that. So I think there is actually a pretty good argument to say the same thing, perhaps with from Lightning to having these Lightning channel factories on top, just because the implications, the setup, the interfaces, and all that is still so unclear that my mind can't help but like try to just figure it out, even if it doesn't really produce anything. It's
Mhm.
still the at least far as I can tell, the place where we're going to get the most scale, going like in the future, like that's going to be like the biggest source of the scale that we get. Like Lightning Labs has that thing where it's like they're going to want to onboard the next billion people, but I think channel factories are going to end up being the thing that onboards the next couple billion after that. And how that actually pans out is entirely unclear to me. And I guess that's the source of my anxiety, concern, thought process, etc.
Gotcha. So, Chaz, you want to bring it back and explain in a nutshell? I know that it's a little tricky and some stuff still up in the air being worked on right now, but could you explain channel factories in a few sentences?
Sure. So right now, channels are limited to um, the situation where there's only two parties in the channel, so you and your counterparty.
Yeah.
And so with any Prev out and L2 gives the ability to have multi-party channels where essentially you're agreeing with more than two parties in the channel to have a channel together. So the easiest situation that I can think of this occurring is me, someone else I really trust, and maybe my mom or dad or someone that it just has no idea about Bitcoin, has no idea about Lightning, and would be able to kind of tag along with me on this channel, and create different situations with that construction. So boil down to its easiest thing, instead of two people, you can have more than two people now. Does that explain it, or should we have more than that?
No. I think that was a great explainer in a nutshell. Yeah, it's going to be really interesting to see how all this stuff shakes out as far as how are these relationships forged, and who's putting up the UTXOs in these different arrangements. Like, obviously if you had, like, I don't know, let's say tens, hundreds of people in the channel now, like, how are you going to do that? Multiple UTXOs and inputs. But what you brought up, scaling this to the next billion people or whatever, like, how many of those people are going to be actively managing UTXOs themselves? Probably not many.
Right.
And as we bring more and more people on, making these actual on-chain transactions, it's going to become more and more rare thing. So I'm really curious to see how, like, those mechanics are going to work out. Like, what are these users going to be charged for getting a share of this giant channel that got opened by this entity, or in collaboration with a couple different big entities and countless users on it. So yeah, it's really hard to sort of wrap your head around, like, what it's going to look like. And I think the people who do have an idea of or want to actualize this are still trying to iron out a lot of the particulars too. It's really hard to think of something in theory and then versus like having it in practice, and how people are going to use it for their own needs.
So are multi-party channels the same thing as channel factories? I was under the impression that those were different concepts altogether.
it's my understanding that they're the same thing. Someone else is welcome to come up here and correct us, though.
Yeah, I think they're the same thing, right? It's just multiple participants in creating what are like non-custodial channels, right? So I believe that maybe there's nuance in the definitions. I know there's been a lot of discussion about what certain things in Lightning mean, but from my understanding, it's just multi-party non-custodial channels.
But I gotta listen to the podcast. I mean, that interview sounds fantastic. I know Christian Decker is always someone to listen to as far as developments, and especially on Sea Lightning stuff.
Yeah, Chaz got another one out this week as well. That was pretty interesting. Admittedly, I haven't spun it yet, but it's downloaded. It's with Ruben Thompson, talking about a whole bunch of stuff. You get into a lot of stuff with state chains there, huh, Chaz?
Yeah, that was mainly trying to be my first podcast where we really try to explain any prev out and L2 as much as possible, and then kind of launch into, well, what does that get us kind of thing. So obviously the big thing that any prev out gets you is L2, and with L2 that gets you all sorts of different things, including channel factories and including potentially blind state chains. And now I'm not going to be the one that tries to explain state chains or blind state chains to you, but essentially you can move around a UTXO the whole thing without sharing your private keys or otherwise having it be custodial. There is a current implementation of the non-blind version that does not have any prev out or any L2 or anything, and that's the Mercury wallet, who is currently in a test net with their implementation.
Oh yeah,
It sounds
Mercury.
very interesting. Sorry, go ahead.
Yeah, Mercury is going to be quite interesting. Know a couple of people working on that, and yeah, expecting some pretty awesome things from them. That should be sweet to see. But yeah, it's just like what it's on testnet right now only, or reg test.
I'm not too clear if it's on reg test or testnet specifically. I just know they're in testing, so we'll just assume reg test for now. But I think the biggest takeaway that I've taken away from the interview with Ruben Thompson, I had another interview with Rusty and Fiat Jaff, and then I had the interview with Christian Decker. The biggest thing that I took away from these kind of like heavyweights in the ecosystem is that our future is going to be very complex and full of different layer 2 implementations, hopefully working in concert, but maybe for the short term, it might just be a giant mess as we figure out different layer 2s or different off-chain scenarios. I think we need to get into the habit of not calling them layer 2s or layer anything. It's off-chain and on-chain. But yeah, I think we're going to be in for a very messy future.
So why do you say not layer 2? Is it because there's going to be things built on top of layer 2 solutions, or do you just not like the layer model at all?
I think it gets so complex and things are kind of interchangeable. Mm-hmm. So for example, you can have state chains or you can have Lightning work on state chains. Now, is state chains layer 2 and Lightning layer 3? So it just turns into this giant mess of you trying to decide the semantics of it all when it's all irrelevant. You could just say it's off chain, period, we're done. And then get to the conversation that is actually relevant, is like, what kind of assumptions are we breaking in on the security side, and try to figure it out from there. So, because you could say Coinbase is off chain, but obviously the thought process there is much different than off chain Lightning or off chain whatever the fuck. So,
yeah. Yeah, it's crazy. Who even knows what things are gonna look like next year? Like, forget the next cycle, you know. But yeah, I mean, ultimately, I see the same sort of future with multiple off-chain solutions, and people providing different services to cross into those domains and offer up liquidity in different ways.
Right. And I think that's the fun thing here is we're going to get to play with all kinds of different toys and things in the next few years. We're going to have state chains, space chains. I really don't like the idea of drive chains, but I'm sure we're going to end up getting into that quite a bit in the next few years anyway. We're like the conversations have just begun. Once we have Taproot in, people are just going to be screaming about it all day on Twitter. It's like, why not BIP 300? Why not BIP 300?
300, 301.
But what was up?
300 and 301, all the state chain stuff that what's his name? Paul Stork has been pushing.
Drive chain stuff. I think you mean.
Oh, drive chain. Yeah, thank you for the correction. Yeah, it's going to be fascinating. Like, I think people really need to see the game theory mechanics in play. So I don't know. Hopefully, we get the suckers over at Litecoin to go and integrate that for us first, and we could see how the dynamics play out. Because I think that's like the biggest thing right now. It's like all this stuff with sidechains has been largely theoretical. I mean, Paul also put together a client on like one of the test nets that had a drive chain for like Zcash or something. And that was really awesome to see and to like get an idea of like, okay, what these potential interfaces could look like and what the flows look like. But that didn't really exhaust like all the like game theory mechanics in place and like what miners are going to have to do and whatnot. And I think that's where a lot of people's uncertainty on the drive chain stuff lays. I think it's just been drilled into our heads that the theory, like the game theory behind everyone's incentives have to line up for Bitcoin to run smoothly, and there's a lot of hesitation into adding any other factors there, any other mechanics or whatnot.
Speaking of incentives, this week I saw Lightning Labs or Desiree Dickerson hosted a Lightning 101 space, and I unfortunately didn't get to attend, but I was really curious to see how that goes, and I was curious to tie this into incentives. What are people's incentives right now to actually run a Lightning node and get exposure to this technology? Just getting started, I think, is probably the first step, probably the hardest.
Yeah, that is true. Hey, hi Chaz, hi Evan, hi Justifer, hi everybody. Actually, I heard the comment by Chaz, and I couldn't agree more about the off-chain part and the layer 2 part, because it is already getting very messy. You already have Liquid, which is a side chain, and you've got Lightning, which is supposed to be the traditional layer 2. You can have Liquid on top of Lightning already. So then what do you call that, isn't it? And then with all the other let's just say off-chain applications and off-chain standards coming about, I mean, it is going to be very difficult to keep calling things as layer 2 or side chains. And on that note, I was actually thinking, how long are we going to call our little group over here as the Lightning Network space? Pretty soon we're going to have to come up with some of the name that doesn't exclude the 10 new things that are going to come out in the next 6 months.
That's a very interesting point that I have kind of run into running a Lightning Network podcast. It's like I'm getting Ruben on to talk about state chains. Is that really Lightning Network? So yeah, I would definitely agree with that part.
Yeah, and I heard that talk with Ruben day before yesterday. It was very good, very informative. I didn't know so much about AnyPriv out, before that, apart from Chaz, bringing it up in every Friday conversation. But yeah, it was very good. And yes, if you see that, then it was not all about Lightning, isn't it? Because you've been talking about all these side chains as well. So they're not Lightning, but they are so relevant to Lightning as well, right? So relevant to Bitcoin as well. So yeah, it's going to be interesting. I think we say 2021 has been interesting so far, but I think once all of these standards do come out and we start experimenting with them, we're going to find some winners and some applications that that really do fill that need, maybe that we don't even know about, and we'll just be using them. However, one thing that I see is, I think because of all of these things coming up, and because these things are already so complicated for somebody to adopt, for a newcomer to adopt, I think keeping all of this non-custodial and easy for new coin, sort of new entrants to use is going to be a major challenge. And I almost think it's not going to be possible. So we are going to have a situation where majority of the people who use Bitcoin are going to use it in a custodial way, at least to begin with, I think. If you take the example of El Salvador, it's semi-custodial to custodial, isn't it? And very few are non-custodial. And with the way things are going, that's probably how the initial intake will be. The new initial cohort that starts using Lightning in El Salvador, that's going to be custodial or semi-custodial, isn't it? So that's going to be the pattern, across the board. Only when people do learn, do understand, and we make applications that are very easy for people to use in a non-custodial manner, then only non-custodial use will increase.
So I wanted to connect what you just said with something that Evan kind of said earlier about channel factories, that the next couple billion people, what have you, might end up onboarding in this kind of very suboptimal way of being custodial or semi. So my thought process is probably the same, that we're going to end up scaling the fastest and the most when we kind of use these more custodial solutions here. And I don't know, besides just education, getting us out there as much as possible, trying to make it as clear as possible to people, how to prevent that future where we accidentally onboard 1 billion people onto some custodial thing that we don't really like at the end of the day. Like, I don't want to build that, but are we going to accidentally build it? Are we going to make it so easy that they just do it anyway, and now we're left standing here being like, well, guys, that's the wrong way to do it? I don't see a clear path to prevent that.
Absolutely, and it's gonna. So if you look at right now, without naming any names, if you look at some amazing wallets out there, I'm not just talking about Zeus. Zeus is amazing and it's non-custodial, but a lot of new wallets that have come out that people have just adopted like crazy, they are not non-custodial. And now when people start using those wallets, it's going to be a challenge to actually convince them to use something else. I think we can go as far as a communal node maybe, but to have everybody running their own node is going to be a challenge. And that is why what I do is I'm constantly experimenting with trying to make a wallet with their own node, with the node in the phone itself, like Neutrino, so that the users don't even know that they've got their own node, and they end up having their own node in the phone, and that serves some level of non-custodial use without having to set up a node separately, running it separately, and maintaining it separately. And then carrying it around like Justifer is doing.
So one thing that pops up is, like, when you use a custodial node, sometimes you encounter some fees that you have to pay. And I'm curious if as those fees rise over time, or the custodial wallets figure out their revenue model, that it might be tacking on an additional fee every time a payment is sent, that people might actually choose to invest in their own hardware and try and do the routing themselves, or connect to some peers, for example. It's similar in the way that, while running a routing node might not actually make you any money, but it saves you some money with on-chain fees.
So my thought process and concern is with channel factories where maybe the fees are deferred far more than they are in maybe one of these UX friendly Lightning wallets might be, like Phoenix or um, God, my brain is not helping me here. Well, we'll just use Phoenix. And it just makes me think that it's going to be so easy and so cheap on these higher layers, where you don't need to think about it. Where is going to be the pressure at that point? Maybe if fees on base chain Bitcoin get really high, maybe eventually they'll find their way to, channel factories and making those kind of less advantageous. But something that everyone may not be aware of is what you can do once you already have a channel factory. You can actually create sub channels on top of that channel factory. So without calling it another layer on top, I'm going to call another layer on top. That you would have like sub channels where, so you could say, let's say me, Evan, and Justifer and Ali all have a channel together. But let's say me and Ali want to just have a channel amongst ourselves. We could have a sub channel that can open and close without their having to touch the base chain of Bitcoin. Now, I think this is going to be where we end up finding a lot of scale, where we can do all kinds of different crazy bullshit and then close to the Lightning Network and not close to base chain Bitcoin. So I kind of got sidetracked my own point here on channel factories to mention this, but think about how cheaply and easily these other layers are going to be compared to the situation we have now, where there is this real cost on base chain Bitcoin. There's still a cost on Lightning, but what is it going to look like on channel factories? And since these kind of sub channels are interoperable with regular Lightning channels, it's like, I think it creates a very complicated dynamic that is not easy to see at this particular stage. So will we have that same pressure to, get your own node at that point? Maybe not.
Well, in theory, the fees that get passed down to the user are going to be lower. So you're right. They might not have the incentive to run the node if they could just go through their trusted parties that set up their channel factories, or, maybe it's not so trusted. But the fact is that the fees that these, pseudo custodial solutions, right, are using, in which like they're automating their channel opens to all the users, like the fees that they pay are like abstractions of opening those channels. So if each UTXO that goes into one of these channel factories, right, gets split up amongst, 5, 10, 20, 100 users, then the fees can be divided by, essentially that much. I mean, it depends on, which UTXOs are selected, how many are selected, and also exactly how these channel factories are constructed. But, in theory, the fees that are passed down to the users would be, far less. So, yeah, there's potentially less incentive to run your own node with these sort of constructs in place. And I feel like that's sort of a good thing, because in a lot of places, like, people can't afford to set up their own Raspberry Pis. As much as like a $200 or $300 setup may sound trivial for people like us in the Western world or whatever, that's not the reality for everyone else.
So are you kind of saying that we should expect to see like a Bitcoin Beach channel factory, basically?
Yeah, I mean that would be better in that it would be less trusted, right? And it's not like people have like some abstraction layer on top of your actual channels. Like, seems like that would be much better. It's just we just need to be conscious of the level of entry, the barrier of entry of becoming sovereign in this domain. It's not trivial. Opening channels and managing them has a really high cost. The hardware has a high cost. Syncing the blockchain takes time and resources. So yeah, it's important to be looking at it at all. And I think like something like these implementations working with prune nodes and sort of the stuff Star9 was doing with their middleware, that goes a long way in that you no longer need this huge solid state disk. You could lower the costs. I mean, you're going to have write limits on something like an SD card, but at least you don't need the full blockchain anymore. You're not dealing with 350 gigs or whatever it is right now, just to even have the state to be able to interact on L2. But it's sort of understated what something like channel factories could do. At least in theory.
I heard the phrase community custodial thrown around, at least by Stefan Livera, when it comes to like the Bitcoin Beach wallet. Did you all get a good sense of what that actually means?
So in my mind, that's like, okay, you're not running your own node, but there's someone in your local community that's acting like the Uncle Jim for your direct local community. It's not like held by some corporation in some other city. It's like push comes to shove, barring the guy doesn't run town with the hardware, you can go to someone's doorstep and be like, hey, what the hell? My Lightning balance is not properly showing up here. Help me out. Which, it's definitely better than having a corporation manage it, especially if it's local, but it's still as a far from ideal solution.
And
Ali, you were saying?
I think the on-chain funds are in a multi-sig wallet. I don't know the threshold and the number of participants in there, but the on-chain wallet is controlled by a multi-sig with a lot of signatories, and that's where the community members come in. So there is a level of trust there.
Now we're talking about the Bitcoin Beach wallet on Galoy.
Yeah.
Gotcha.
Yeah. And that is why you can't just pick up although it's open source, you can't just take that wallet and use it elsewhere in the world, because you will need to have this local community level node set up, and there will need to be a grassroots level movement there. Well, not a huge movement, at least some community awareness to organize around a group of individuals who will control that on-chain wallet and then set up that node and run it, and then you can have that community using the Bitcoin Beach wallet.
Gotcha. So all the channel opens, all their on-chain fund management, they do it with a multi-sig wallet. So they have some sort of committee in which, if one member runs off, they can't really do anything.
Yeah, I've not gone through the code in detail, but yeah, basically that's what it appears to be. So the nodes, the node that opens up all of the channels for the individuals to receive payments is opened by that multi-sig on-chain account, which is controlled by the the community members.
Gotcha.
Well, it certainly moves it away from like the kind of the colonial idea of some outside party that's not one of your countrymen. But it does sound a bit like a federation, but it's more of a local federation.
It is, and I kind of like that idea. It's like I can understand that. Like you've got a little community of of your neighborhood. and you trust the people around you. You let them manage your state, don't you? So here you're letting them manage the channels for you. Money in that channel, they're gonna keep. When it reaches a certain threshold, everyone will take it out and put it into their permanent wallet somewhere else. So you're just using it for your daily transactions, so to say, and not leaving everything in there. And periodically you take money out and put it in your cold store, cold card or some other hardware wallet that you have.
That's fantastic. Yeah, I guess it's a lot more nuanced than to say this is custodial or non-custodial. As and what I've noticed in Lightning is we've got a lot more like gray area as far as trust goes. And I know I'd like to really make like balanced channels with friends and in different Telegram chats, and then there's also like a Ring of Fire stuff, which is even less trust. But it's sort of
What's the new website that came up? Lightning Network Plus or something?
Oh, that was a big one. I forgot the name of it.
Yeah, lightningnetwork.plus on the web. Swap index. You could plug yourself into a couple of these different liquidity rings. There's sets of 3, sets of 4, sets of 5, all for different amounts too. And it just lists how many slots are open, and you could get in on any of these. So yeah, that was pretty cool to see that pop up this week. I think that's a really cool one to mention. And it's based on user accounts, so you can see the users and what their reputations are. Are they a dev in the space? Are they a pleb? What other channels they have open? So yeah, it's pretty cool to see that. It looks like they have 238 plebs, as they say, signed up. So that's pretty good. I've been liking stuff like this. I've been liking what the guys over at PlebNet are doing as far as the liquidity rings go, and I feel like they're taking it to the nth degree. They have like even more hops. I noticed they have a graph of their community registered nodes. So they have like a bot that you can prove you have ownership of your node on, and you use like LND sign message function to get it set up on there. Then you could see how all the members in their community are set up. And then last time I chopped on one of their Clubhouse calls, it sounded like they were helping each other out with doing some Watchtower stuff. So you're like, okay, I don't have a second node to watch my node, but maybe I'll have someone in the community be my node Watchtower buddy or something. And everyone has a buddy or 2 or 3 that they watch your node and you watch theirs, and it helps in situations like let's say you're Justifer and you're moving across the country, and you can't call out the shenanigans you normally would because of your connectivity issues on the road or something. This would be a really cool way to solve that problem. So really awesome seeing like community-driven solutions. Ultimately a lot of these behaviors are going to have to be driven by markets, right, and price incentives. But it's really awesome this early on that people are forming sub-communities to help each other out with these aspects. So yeah, it's been awesome to see.
Yeah, I really like the whole idea of sub networks. Like I'm not active so much in PlebNet, but we've got 2 other channels that I'm, or 2 other Telegram chats that I'm like admin for. So I have lots of connections there. But it's kind of nice because like each of those different chats and those different communities have their own particular flavor. Where we got like balanced channels, which a paid group, and then Lightning Network chat, which is like all open, and then PlebNet, which is like full degen, and then there's like rings with kind of like a it almost seemed like an art focused, where they just wanted to make really cool designs on the graphs that are output from Cheese Robot, that bot that you mentioned that kind of graphs the stuff out.
Yeah, Cheese Robot. Yeah. Yeah, so that stuff's been really cool to see. Yeah, like I said, it's going to be interesting to see how these communities develop, because I think a lot more stuff is going to be driven by, the economics of it, like people buying liquidity and whatnot. But still really awesome to see. So yeah, guys, check those out. The first one we mentioned was lightningnetwork.plus. And then if you want to get on PlebNet, I believe their domain's kycjelly.com. No spaces or dashes. They make a lot of great jokes on there. Yeah, KYC Jelly will take you to their Telegram chat. They've got a lot of members. It's over 1,569 members. Nice. And yeah, a whole bunch online. There's always chats going on. I really got to get in on the next ring. But yeah, definitely a really awesome thing to see in the Lightning Network community as a whole pop up. So yeah, there's becoming less and less excuses to not have a Lightning node, not to have channels, not to have liquidity. It's getting easier and easier every month that goes by.
Yeah, and I heard this podcast last week of Shinobi helping Peter setting up his own node.
Nice.
And the final, and yeah, it's a whole audio without really knowing what's happening on the screen. So it's very interesting, and it's a 2-part. So I called it a mystery, actually, a mystery 2-part episode. And yeah, it was really good though. So yeah, there's a lot of information, lots happening. I think there's very little excuse now not to run your own node. It's becoming more and more easy. Every day on Twitter I see somebody posting a Raspberry Pi picture with their node. So it's really great to see that. Yeah, and GetUmbrel has made it really easy. My node as well. You can just plug it in. Quite a few options out there.
Yeah, there's like a whole bunch actually, and I'd be remiss not to mention on Citadel Dispatch, Matt had a whole bunch of the developers there. You think there's something like 6 major projects revolving around like nodes and self-hosting in the space right now. Matt had on about 5 of those 6 projects. I think everyone but Umbrel. And yeah, I mean, there's just options for every kind of person, really. Like, if you're non-technical, I would say Umbrel is, just so easy to set up, good user defaults, and great user interface, just like right in the web, and it looks like super modern. And I think everyone else has a lot of catching up to do in that regard. But again, not a great license. It's not like a free open source license compared to the other projects. Then you get like Raspberry Blitz, which is my personal favorite. It's what I got rolling on. Well, I did Raspberry Bolt first, actually. That sort of teaches you all the commands of Bitcoin-D and LND. But yeah, that sort of evolved into Raspberry Blitz, which is probably the best one for technical people in contrast. You also have Ronin Dojo. That doesn't do Lightning, but really good for doing coin joins on Whirlpool. Really dig that one. My node probably has the best selection of Bitcoin apps all in all, but you got to pay for the premium stuff like getting Tor connectivity. What else? I'm sure I'm forgetting another one. Nodl was on there. Nodl has like the best pre-built solutions, I think. I really like their what is it? The Nodl Dojo, which is a Samurai branded one, and that one's sick. It's really expensive. It's like $800, but you get like RAID SSDs, and it'll auto shut down if someone tries to open the case, and all the drives are encrypted. So they've got some cool security mechanisms in there. And what else? I feel like I'm missing another one. But anyway, like no matter how technical you are, whatever your level is, there's an option for you now You have to get the parts together. It's going to probably cost, probably $250 to $300, maybe less if you get a deal on the solid state drive. But yeah, I mean, that's all you need, and you could run any of these platforms pretty much, with some exceptions, and become a self-sovereign, first-class citizen on both the Bitcoin and Lightning networks. So the more people that we encourage to do so, is the more people that we liberate, from financial and surveillance perspective. And, the less bottlenecks we have on the network, less people dependent on these third parties, less people have the opportunity of having the rug pulled on them or have a chance of being surveilled. So, yeah, every time I see someone post like their new setup on Twitter, on Bitcoin Twitter, it's always a good sign. Really, really good to see.
Have you been keeping an eye on the Lightning Network growth? Just how much Bitcoin is going onto there? I figure Ryan Gentry is keeping a close eye on that because it's going kind of parabolic, and I imagine LND is very interested in that.
Yeah, the numbers have been looking great the past even the past like 2 months, I would say. The past 1 month even, it's been getting insane. And I suspect a lot of that has to do with all the waves that the El Salvador stuff brought up. But hell, that's the most important chart out of them all, right? That's the chart that we need more than any other chart that we're looking at to go up and to the right. And it's happening. It's still going to take some time, and they're going to be even larger periods of growth, I think, over time as this network gets adopted. But it's been really awesome to see the growth right now. Let's see if we could pull up the stats on the public channels right now. Let's see. Lightning total capacity is 1,648.13 BTC. That's the current value of 54.6 million. Let's give something else as reference. So for reference, Liquid's capacity, which is entirely known, is just under 3,000 Bitcoin, or 97.3 million. That's at 2,938.94 Bitcoin. So Liquid still got a bit of a leg up. And I think the Samurai Whirlpool capacity passed 3,000 BTC, so they got more than either of them by themselves, with about 100 million in unspent value. So Lightning Network still got a way to go, but this past month I feel like it's been up a whole bunch, at least in Bitcoin terms. I'm not sure if anyone else has the exact figures on what the monthly growth has been, but I feel like it's been quite high. Oh, and another thing I should bring up with Lightning Network is this is just from the capacity that we see publicly that's being broadcast by nodes over the Gossip Network. And anyone who's messed around with LND and gotten into the weeds of stuff, or any of the implementations, really know that you can open up private channels that are not broadcast to the rest of the graph, that are only known by the two participants. And I don't know, I would say it's probably something like 30% of extra capacity is in private channels like that. And if they're not now, I think it's going to be a massive trend between big institutions that want to have liquidity between each other, but don't want to just broadcast it and have people take advantage of it. So, as much as we're seeing great numbers in terms of public capacity, we don't really know. We can only surmise what that private capacity and the gains in private capacity look like. So that's really exciting too.
Yeah, it definitely is. And I think in particular, like the way I've started thinking about capacity, because again, this is not like DeFi where, we're optimizing for really large total value lock. Like the whole point of Lightning is to be really capital efficient, and to recycle the capital that is, in public channels as much as possible. But I've started thinking of it as it's like the lower bound, like the minimum amount of capital that's in Lightning is kind of like the public routing capacity, which I think is still like it's a useful metric, but that's a good way to, I think about it and kind of focus where it's like, it's good to see that number going up, but it by no means tells the whole story of what's going on. And I also think it's definitely for sure a lagging indicator. Like all of this, it's a result of this, like, last month of an additional 100 Bitcoin or something being allocated to the network in public channels is a result of like all the work of everybody in the ecosystem over the last 6 months plus, of the Umbrel guys, getting their nodes set up really user friendly, of the PledMet ecosystem getting set up and making it easy for people to get started and giving people a reason, like just for you were talking about the incentive earlier, right? And like, yeah, there's probably not all that much of an economic incentive for these people, but like there's a huge community incentive because these people have made it fun, right? They've made it like a cool group thing to do, community thing to do. I think, the exchanges getting on board, of course, the Bitcoin Beach people, et cetera, et cetera. Like I can just go down the list and talk about all the great work that's been going on in the ecosystem, kind of, relatively unnoticed, although we certainly try and highlight it, at least in our monthly newsletter. There's just been like a ton of great stuff happening over the last 6 months. And so, this kind of like, it's finally showing up now in the chart that everybody wants to look at. I wish we had some better charts that we could show, but that's just kind of not the nature of the network. But it's really cool. And I think it's only, we're still just getting started. And I think the one other thing I wanted to mention was, Chaz, you were talking about kind of your anxiety with respect to, are we going to onboard a bunch of people into custodial wallets and, have it be too late to get them, too soon. We're doing this too soon, and the non-custodial ones are going to get up to par too late. I think the great thing about Lightning that you guys have already talked about is that there are so many options. There's like a whole spectrum from, being self-sovereign, which is still a little too hard. We need to make it easier, to being, fully custodial, and all sorts of gray area in between. And I think it's not really, the way I like to think about this is, it's incumbent upon us, like, to make sure it is as easy as possible, and the barrier to entry for running your own node and managing your own channels is like doable for anybody, anywhere. But it's not on us to like prescribe to people that they must run their own nodes, because there's a lot of people that like live in jurisdictions where they're perfectly happy, outsourcing the node and the channel management to some third party. Not everybody's going to run their own node, but as long as we make it to where it's as easy as possible, I think that's kind of the best that we can do. Kind of like, and so one thing we're thinking about with Lightning Pool, with trying to create this marketplace of LSPs, instead of there being, one big Async node or one big Breeze node or, one big Moon node, is trying to kind of front run that centralization a little bit, and make it to where, there's a marketplace of kind of these, your first hop nodes, all of which are fungible and can provide like the same level of service. I think it's still in alpha, so we still got a bunch of stuff that we want to add to it that'll bring kind of the capabilities of the marketplace up to par with all the great work that Async and Breeze and those guys have done. But I think we're getting there. I think that'll be important going forward, to have that as kind of like an alternative to, a straight up custodial wallet. That'll make it, again, like just lowering the barrier to entry to being fully self-sovereign, if you'd like.
So Ryan, I understand we can't really, Lightning can't really prescribe a certain, say that, everyone should run their own node or a similar suggestion. But I think different operational modes can be described. And I'm not suggesting that LND or Lightning Lab should do it. I'm just talking in general. I think there should be awareness that there are different ways of taking part in this. I think in today's conversation, what we discussed was non-custodial, custodial. Then there's this gray area of semi-custodial. Then we talked about the Uncle Jim model, and we talked about the community model. Now, out of these models, depending on which part of the world an individual is or a community is, they might choose one of these, if they know that this is how it works and this is how it has worked elsewhere. Imagine, people do not know about this technology, but if we do make information available somehow that these are the different ways you can run it, and these are the trade-offs in each one, right? These are the inherent risks in doing it in this operational way, and these are the advantages. Then I think it would help people make decisions. We talk about Bitcoin Beach a lot. I do think it was an organic development with a lot of effort from the people at the grassroots level. We don't know how it's going to pan out for the rest of El Salvador. So let's say if this information is available to, if not everybody, then to a lot of people in El Salvador, then different groups of individuals and different individuals privately will be able to make a decision whether they want to have their own node, whether they want to have a node for their family, or for a larger community. I think this information is not easily available. So I think that is a piece for education, I guess, and awareness, which would really help people adopt Lightning.
Yeah, I think that's a good point, and I think like we've been spending a lot of time on the phone with folks in Latin America, in the Latin American Lightning community in particular, about translating materials, Lightning, all the ecosystem materials that we have into Spanish, to try and increase that. And I know that there's, a veritable army. It's pretty amazing just how many people have been popping out of the woodwork and reaching out and trying to figure out how to help and who to collaborate with to accomplish exactly that. Because I think you're right. And I think, this is one of the frustrating yet beautiful things about truly decentralized ecosystems is they're generally like a little slow to get started. Like when something pops up, everybody's kind of waiting around to see if somebody's going to take charge or, take action. But then once they get moving and once people start, taking action, it happens just incredibly fast because there's so many people able to operate in parallel and not depend on each other and just able to execute. And so I think we're going to see that over this month in particular. Kind of people spend a lot of June, trying to figure out how to get started, trying to figure out kind of like where best to spend their time and resources. And I think over the next month and next months over the rest of the summer, I think you'll be pretty surprised at just how fast the broad ecosystem rallies and rises to the occasion. Because I'm already seeing it, like it's already happening. It's pretty cool, and I think like that general, like over the year that I've been at Lightning Labs, like I've just seen that same theme play out kind of over and over and over and over again, where something happens, ecosystem takes like a little bit to get going and to like respond to it, but then once momentum starts to build, it's just is unstoppable. And whatever solution or problem or opportunity had presented itself, gets claimed, fixed, and the community moves on to the next thing, and it's just over and over and over and over again, which is pretty amazing to watch. It's really inspiring.
Yeah, we're all looking forward to it. I think September is going to be interesting. And most probably I'm going to be there in September in El Salvador. So hopefully I'll get to see it live.
That's a good point with that internationalization. We've been trying to add that to amboss.space and we've got Spanish added, but then we find out that there's a whole bunch of folks in Japan that have been building out their nodes and registering those. So I'm kind of curious if there's any good internationalization models to take a look at to kind of rapidly do this, because I mean, I think we're getting into the suddenly phase of gradually then suddenly.
So
Yeah,
are
it's a
you
little
looking
crazy.
for?
Sorry, I was just
Sorry,
gonna
Evan.
say, yeah, no worries. I was just saying the last couple of months have been really insane, and I
Yeah.
definitely feel that too.
Yeah, so just with regards to the internationalization, right? Do you mean some automatic APIs, so something like that, or something else?
Yeah, just sort of assembling folks in the different countries to like build out the languages that might be able to translate. Just make it easy for folks. But maybe that's more of a what's on my mind specifically rather than Lightning in general.
Right. No, I think that is important. Yeah, yeah. No, no. The thing is, I've explored some options actually. So, yeah, I thought maybe you were referring to some technical solution for that.
So, did anyone look into the El Salvadorian wallet that everyone's getting their $30 with their BTC on? What's it called? Chivos? I forget.
Yeah, Chivo.
What's their model for custody?
I think it's completely custodial and run by the El Salvadoran government, at least from my understanding. I didn't get to watch the entire PowerPoint presentation, State of the Union, their president did.
Yeah, it's custodial. The $30 that's going to be there, so it has to be used from that particular wallet. You only get it in that particular wallet, so you have an incentive to sort of get that wallet to start with. The other interesting things about that wallet are, I think there are no transaction fees as well, I think. So that is also going to be a huge incentive for people to sort of use that particular wallet and not any other wallet to start with at least. So yeah, but I think it's based on getting people to use Lightning in the easiest and simplest way possible. I think that has been the driving force there, and I guess people who are there, I guess they understand what's best to start with, from each person's perspective. So that's what it looks like at the moment. But I think everyone is free to use whichever wallet they want. But for that $30 incentive, it'll have to be the cheaper wallet to start with.
Hey, sorry about that, guys. I got a phone call right mid conversation there. Hope I didn't leave anybody hanging.
No worries, Ryan. We know you're a busy guy.
Another thing I wanted to bring up that I was just kind of curious what y'all thought was, I proposed to the mailing list, kind of like in addition to the bolts process, something that immediately Rene Picard responded that he had proposed the same thing in 2018, and hilariously Lalo had been the one to turn him down, but just like a BIP style process to let kind of app layer ecosystem best practices just be written down and described, rather than everything having to go through the bolts and flow through the implementation teams. I'm curious kind of what people think about that. There's been some really good discussion on the mailing list about kind of, why not just use the BIPs themselves, et cetera, et cetera. Just kind of wanted to open the floor, see if anybody had strong feelings about it.
It's interesting that you bring it up because during my recent conversation with Rusty Russell and Fiat Jaff, they kind of came up with that idea on their own that there should be some kind of app layer BIP system, because they were going back and forth on stuff that I barely understood, to be entirely honest. So I don't necessarily have an opinion, but I definitely know that this is something that people are thinking about and talking about already. So I guess I would be on board with it, but I'm not really the person that would be making, additions to this or contributions to this per se. So I'm not sure I'm, really the person to be talking about it overall.
Yeah. Well, no, I mean, that's good to hear. And I think like taking multiple steps back, like the motivation behind it is like that the Volts have done a phenomenal job of getting us to this point where we got nation state level adoption in year 3, right? Like that's a phenomenal success. And the fact that there are all of these wallets that all interoperate, that the network is as healthy as it is, like I think the Volts process has been an amazing success. And Rusty and all the people that kind of came up with the process and have adhered to it and have built the spec the way that they have, right, deserve an immense amount of credit. And the only thing is that now, like, it's been so successful that I think the ecosystem has just kind of outscaled this process, right? Like, it's not just Authsync, Blockstream, and Lightning Labs anymore. There's, I think I said either in the email or in the proposed kind of first document that the like standard blip was, I think very confident that the total number of Lightning developers like far outstrips the amount that work at those 3 companies and are working actually on the spec. And so like it's been so successful that now we need just to kind of adjust the process a little bit to provide a way for this broader ecosystem to kind of filter back ideas, requirements, designs, et cetera, and filter that information back to kind of the protocol level developers without needing to ask for permission, right? Where they can just go ahead and innovate and kind of feed that information back, which is, I think, like it's a phenomenal problem to have, right? That this is the best thing that could happen, is that there's too much going on and too much activity for a small group of people to keep their hands on. So I think I'm just really interested to see kind of how the community responds. It seems like it's gotten a decent amount of response thus far, and I think we're just continually trying to grow and trying to make sure that everybody kind of has been a little frustrated over the last couple months. There's been some kind of sniping between protocol teams, between app devs back at the protocol teams, and vice versa, et cetera. And I think it's the root cause, kind of in my opinion, is that this process that we're used to just wasn't designed for this big an ecosystem. And I think with just a couple little tweaks, maybe we can lessen some of those tensions and just improve the general feeling that everybody has that things are working together.
I definitely think it's a good idea overall. Having talked to Fiat Jaff and people like him who some might describe as a full stack developer, because they kind of go wherever they're needed and they try to add something to this kind of ecosystem. And once again, I think Fiat Jaff does so many different little things all over the place. I think having a kind of community place where everyone can input and add more versus trying to kind of go through the more arduous process of getting things into the Bolt spec, which seems, just from my naive perspective, kind of arduous and not entirely straightforward. Even if, you're talking to Rusty and he tells you it's relatively simple. Don't believe him on that. But I'm not sure if he's ever said that, to be clear. But I think it makes a lot of sense, because I think something like LNURL essentially came out of the void of not having this kind of BIP-like system in place for the app layer. And so people just kind of, hacked this stuff together and just made it and threw it out there. And it just got popular because it it did the function that, wasn't already present. So making that process a little bit more formalized and a little bit more clear and in the open would, seems a little like an obvious slam dunk then, put in that context.
Yeah, I'm pretty pumped for it. What's the name again? So Bolts is going to stay for the protocol changes, and this new system will be for, more so like application development layer sort of stuff, right?
Yeah, I mean, like, there's a couple. So, what we liked when we were talking about at Lightning Labs was like blips, so Bitcoin Lightning improvement proposals. Bastian at Async, like, his number one request was that we allow for it being called Sparks instead. Like, he was like, yeah, I don't really care about, like, how you propose it or anything, but just, can we call it Sparks? So Fiat Jeff came up with like a good acronym for that. I don't know. It's like standards per request of something. Like the K stands is community with a K, which I thought was clever. I don't remember. It's written in the email. But then now, like, Junior, Michael Folkson, a couple more of like the Bitcoin core developers have said, and I think even Fiat Jeff's latest response to the email was in favor of this, was like, why don't we just use the BIPs? Why reinvent the wheel? Like, Lightning is Bitcoin and Bitcoin is Lightning, right? Like, they're one and the same. So why not just keep it in the BIPs and instead of doing something separate? Which is, I don't know. I don't really have strong feelings on it. And I, of course, like, I doubt I'll be writing too many of these myself. But the idea is just, yeah, like, there are BIPs for, obviously for Taproot level proposals. There are BIPs for, PSBT type protocols. There are BIPs just for informational stuff, just describing, how certain processes work. There's BIPs for all kind of stuff. They're just like general design documents. And I think we could have, tracks that would be kind of like, core consensus stuff, protocol layer stuff, like interoperability stuff. We have routing network stuff. We could have, application layer stuff. Pathfinding is something that's like out kind of extra protocol a little bit, and there's a lot of people taking a lot of different approaches to that. And it would be great to have the different approaches written down. Like, I think just in general, it's just a place for documenting different approaches and different things that are done in like this really broad design space that we have.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I think something like this would be really good for what OpenOms and I are trying to do, where we sort of have like some standardized connection string for connecting your app, like a Zeus, for example, to the various different Lightning implementations. So, this could potentially be a forum for us to propose that. So that could be pretty cool.
Yeah, absolutely. I think that's a perfect example. I think actually in the original email, I listed like remote connection standards as like one of the examples we came up with, which is like, there are a bunch of people doing this already, right? There's LND Connect. There's, a couple other things like it, right? Not all of them are really written down anywhere. It would be great just to have that stuff written down and spec'd out and have a place for people, the ecosystem to kind of make comments and look at what people are doing. And, if people align on a standard, great. If people have different perspectives and trade-offs and there are a couple that end up working, well, at least they're documented and they're all in one place, right?
Yeah, for sure. So yeah, we'll see. Well, I'm curious to see how that shakes out, but yeah, it definitely sounds like this is an initiative that's much needed at this point. So excited to see how that pans out.
So this would be an opportunity to like add a little bit more standardization to the different applications and such. Like I'm thinking of like an accounting standardization. So I know there's like BOS accounting for like how much your routing node has earned or something, and then trying to get that to integrate with maybe like CoinTracker or something if you wanted to do your accounting for taxes or something.
Yeah, I mean, like, I want to be really careful though and say, like, this is definitely not, like, Lalo did a good job, I think, in one of his emails talking about how, like, the purpose of these is not to be prescriptive. It's not to set forth standards. It's not to say everybody has to do this. Like, that's kind of what the bolts are for, and like they're for that because like every node, in order to be interoperable, like you have to treat forwarding HTLCs in a certain way. Like you have to have certain expected behaviors. This is much more just for like the descriptive side, which is just saying, you know, like maybe an output of documenting a process or a new feature or something that you've added, like accounting, maybe an output of documenting that in one place. Is it just kind of naturally like the broader community aligns on that as a best practice and it forms a standard? But I definitely think rather than prescribing a standard, the purpose of this is just to have a place where it's easy for somebody to describe a feature or a process or whatever, right? A new way of doing things, and describe it in like a standard format that, you know, allows other people to read it and understand it, either implement it on their own, interoperate with it, etc. So I want to be clear with that distinction that, like, you know, it's totally possible, and I would expect probably a majority of these, you know, assuming this gets to hundreds of documents like the VIPs are, it would be perfectly natural for most of those to like never be read by anybody other than the author. But they'll be there, and you know, maybe somebody who wants to figure out how X accounting thing works, they can, you know, go through the documentation and see, oh, this was, you know, blip 137. I can go read it, figure out how it works, and see if I want to implement that for my own project.
I mean, yeah, just on the surface, it sounds fantastic. Just a place to have that conversation on, you know, what this thing should be and document. I think that's a, you know, big area of criticism that, you know, we built all this stuff, but you know, where's it written down? How do you do this thing? So, yeah, that sounds great for long-term growth.
Cool. Yeah. So, you know, not really sure what kind of the next steps are here. We've had some good chatter on the mailing list thus far. You know, I don't know, since Monday is like the observed July 4th holiday in the US. I don't know if there's a Lightning Dev IRC meeting on Monday or if it's pushed or not. I assume there will be good discussion there whenever the next one is. And, you know, we'll see. I do think it's an interesting, the curveball I didn't expect was people suggesting that we just use the BIPs as is, which I think like an interesting thing that I hadn't thought of at all there is, like, so this kind of like, I ended up shooting out the email because of the conversation around ZeroConf channels. And like, you know, John Carvalho wants them, Alsync does them, Breeze does them, Moon does them, etc. Kind of all in their own way. And so trying to figure out like kind of like a standard way to like what the best practice is for actually implementing them. And it kind of struck me as I was thinking about this going into the broader BIPs, like, you know, that's touching a lot of Bitcoin Core type stuff, right? That's touching the chain. That's not really exclusively Lightning. It's about forming a transaction and deals with RBF stuff. There's mempool interplay. There's like a, you know, there's a lot of other interesting Bitcoin stuff. It's not just Lightning stuff that touches. And so maybe having stuff like that go to the broader BIPs mailing list instead of just the Lightning Dev mailing list would be useful, because, you know, somebody like, you know, Andrew Chow or, you know, you name it, some Bitcoin Core developer might see it and have some input that they want to provide. So that's something I hadn't considered that, you know, seems like it could be good. And, you know, theoretically there wouldn't be any additional overhead from the VIPs. as they just kind of proceed as they do. But, you know, maybe we want to keep them separate. I don't really know. So I'm not really qualified to make that decision. So, you know, we'll kind of see what the community comes up with.
Keeping things moving here, just to kind of ask, since we haven't had any other people want to ask questions here, feel free to request to speak and we'll have you up to ask a question if you have a question. So besides that, was there anything else that was on top of anyone's minds when it comes to lightning related topics? We'll even take tangential topics like those terrible drive chains.
One thing that popped up is I think the one node type that we forgot was the Start9 Labs. So gotta give a shout out to them.
Yeah. It was funny because I had mentioned them before that. I was talking about how they had that middleware that enabled them to have, partially synced nodes working with it. But then I forgot during the recap. But yeah, Start9 is also a really cool product. Their license is a little bit restrictive, but I've had a really good experience messing around with their node. It's unique in that they support both C, Lightning, and LND. You could also do like BTC Pay Server, but they've got a lot of stuff catered towards self-hosting solutions. So like a lot of chat apps, you could set up a Mastodon on there. You're going to soon be able to use Matrix on there. There's like file storage servers. So yeah, definitely a unique offering there. And yeah, definitely worth checking out.
Hi there, BTC Chi. Did you have a question?
Yeah, just kind of wondering. I've been basically trying to get an Umbrel node working for several months now, and I went out, bought a new SSD, didn't work. You know, I got rid of the case and just used the regular Raspberry Pi case. Is anyone else having like any like weird problems or whatever, or any suggestions? Because I just can't find anything online to help me, you know, get this running.
So just to be clear, what exactly is the issue? Because I actually had a lot of issues with Umbrel as well.
Well, you know, if I ever do get it syncing, it'll stop and then it's just dead. So I've got to go and reformat the external SSD, stick that back in, and you know, it's just dead. You know, like every time, you know, like anything I do, I reflash the SD card. You know, I've got the regular Raspberry Pi hardware. You know, I'm not like using any hacked up stuff.
Actually, this sounds very similar to my experience with Umbrel. It would sync, and then I wouldn't be unable to access the dashboard for whatever reason, and I could restart it and connect for a few seconds, and then it would go back to like the same white screen or whatever. So what I would suggest, just to rule out any of your hardware, I know you already changed out some of your hardware already, but what I would suggest is try to flash my node or one of the other node implementations instead and see if you have the same trouble. Because on the same Raspberry Pi board, I flashed my node and it worked fine. Like there was no issues after that, and it started up just fine. So I'm not sure if it's the same issue. It's hard to really tell over 30 seconds of explanation, but that's what I would recommend. And if things work fine, you can choose to go back to Umbrel and then try to troubleshoot some more. But I honestly, Umbrel has some questionable things going on their side. So if you can get it to work with an alternative node implementation, that might be the easier route to go. But that's just my opinion.
Okay, thanks for that. I'll try giving my node a shot after this is my absolute last attempt at Umbrel. I'm just doing it. I'm in the middle of doing it right now. But one other question. Can I use the same seed phrase on my node as with Umbrel? Because I did manage to put some Satoshis on Umbrel, long ago before it died on me.
It wouldn't be straightforward because were the sats in a channel yet, or were they you just sent them to your on-chain wallet in preparation or something?
They were just to the on-chain wallet in preparation. I never actually managed to get to the point where I could, get them into a channel with confidence, because I wanted it to run for a few weeks before I did that.
Yeah, so in that sense, if you just sent them to the on-chain wallet, they should be in the, if you were to restore the seed to a new device to my node, it should work fine.
Okay, hey, thanks a lot.
Absolutely.
Yeah, so on that front, you might have to shell into the MyNode and reinitialize the wallet with that seed before you get rolling there, because you might not be able to initialize the seed from the web UI.
I think you can do it from the import though, because I actually did that when I actually converted a Casa node into a my node last year or the year before. And I believe it prompts you to import your seed. Like it says, do you want to start a new one or do you want to import your seed? So
cool. All right, awesome. So there you go. I was gonna say, yeah, BTC Shy. If you have any, or if you need any help with that, just hit me up. Happy to help. But seems like my node might have that cover in the UI, which is awesome to hear. So yeah, it's been a while since I spun up one of those nodes.
Hey, a real noob question here. So if I use the same seed phrase in two different nodes, then will I still be able to receive payments, or will I receive them on both?
So that's why I asked specifically if you had put them into channels. And so I would not recommend doing, using the same seed if you have active channels, because things get much more complicated and not in your favor. So you could potentially, if you backed it up at the wrong place or otherwise, engage with one node over the other, you could end up with a penalty transaction on one of your channels and lose all your funds. Then you have to go find, whoever your counterparty was and ask them to nicely send your money back. So I would not recommend it in that scenario. You should only run your node with one device at a time, because you don't want to risk losing your entire channel just due to logging on to one versus the other.
Got it. Thanks.
Yeah, it's pretty much the nodes are going to get out of sync. Either you're broadcasting two different nodes with two different IP addresses, and one's going to get out of sync, and your channel partners are going to call you on that, or you're going to end up using the same Tor address, right? And the resolution is going to be messed up with that. Half the network could go to one node, half the other, and you're going to end up with the same problem. So yeah, always be careful about your redundancy solutions, having multiple nodes up like that. Having two of the same instance running at the same time is, ripe situation to lose coins. So avoid that at all costs.
Okay.
Yeah, it only really makes sense when you're just using the on-chain wallet only. If it's the on-chain wallet only, you're fine, because essentially at that point it's just a Bitcoin wallet. But I had a question from the audience here from Shinobi. He wanted to ask if Ryan could argue about Lightning Network / Liquid. I'm not sure what he's referring to. Hopefully Ryan will know what I'm referring to.
I mean, I think maybe he's referring to which is better for cross exchange ARB. I think we had some tweets about that a while ago. My perspective is that Lightning is better because it's faster. And like one thing that's kind of crazy, like I don't know if y'all have noticed, but like in the last month or so, like Bitrefill enabled Tether on Tron, which, as all of you who know anybody on the Bitrefill team, you know, Sergey in particular, I'm sure he absolutely hated, but just had tons of requests from people. Like the fact that the value prop of like really short block times, the growth of Tether on Tron is just like staggering. And a lot of it is because I know a bunch of traders that like they love being able to send Tether back and forth between exchanges with, you know, settlement time in the seconds, right? I believe Liquid at minimum still has 1 minute block times. And that's just like, you know, if you're dealing in the single digit seconds, that's just like an eternity. Although it obviously you can send much larger amounts, that time, that settlement time is just killer, especially for traders. So we'll see. I know like Bitfinex recently raised their limits on Lightning because like the obvious counterpoint to that is Lightning is like really capitally constrained, right? We are all, I'm sure, very familiar with the liquidity issues and the fact that it's hard to send large amounts. It's interesting that like, you know, as liquidity improves, as the ecosystem gets bigger, especially as the Bitcoin price starts going up in dollar terms, like Bitfinex just raised their deposit withdrawal limits on Lightning to 5 BTC. That's pretty big, right? You know, yeah, there are traders that are looking to sling, you know, millions of dollars per movement, but you know, 5 BTC, 150K in US dollar terms, and you know, by the end of the year, hopefully, you know, 1.5 million if we get over in the six figures. That's pretty good for a Lightning transaction. That's pretty good for a cross exchange ARB. And you know, especially if my boy Evan here, if we can get Kraken going, right, and maybe some of these other big exchanges, you know, I think you could start seeing some really interesting stuff happening there. Where thus far, kind of like the trading game for Lightning has kind of been relegated mostly to like LN markets, rather than kind of more professional traders. So I think it's interesting, right? We'll see what happens, but that's just my suspicion is that given the other offers on the market and how fast they are in terms of settlement time, with Tron being like the classic example, I think for that specific use case, Liquid is just too slow.
Yes, it is. So was Shinobi's question about settlements? Because I think if it's settlements, then Ryan has given a very good reason why Liquid can prove to be a better settlement layer. But on the other side, right? I'm not. I'm just stating a point. I may be wrong, and I'm not trying to take sides here. Just because I'm interested in both, and I've done research in both. So the advantages of Liquid is you need to run a separate node, basically on top of, not on top of, in addition to a Bitcoin node. So you're not running a separate.
That's where I think
you know, it eliminates the need for channels and all of the channel management that you would need to do manually, or your application would need to do. So it eliminates.
Oh, Ollie's cutting in and out. Ollie, you still there? Is it my line that was the problem?
No, I lost him as well. But
Okay.
actually, up to this point, it's actually worked quite well. I don't mean to jinx it now.
Yeah, we're gonna hit all the issues we hit last week now. Okay, so Ali, I want to let you get your word in, but there's a couple things I wanted to point out there that weren't quite correct. So you do need another layer of software to run on top of Bitcoin D in the form of Elements Core to run your Liquid node. The biggest difference, I would say, that it makes it not quite the same as Lightning is that you could shut it down. You're not really maintaining state in the same way that you would maintain channel state on the Lightning network. And you don't have to do stuff like channel management and whatnot, which was correct. And I think that's where the important distinction is. Like when you're talking about arbitrage between two major institutions, right? Let's say we're going from Bitfinex to Kraken, hopefully, hopefully somewhat soon. I won't say when, but hopefully soon. And you're trying to arbitrage and make that trade, right? Ultimately, at the end of the day, you're sort of going to be bottlenecked, unless there's an alternate route, by the channel capacity of in the direction from Bitfinex to Kraken. And in this regard, I could see bigger arbitrage traders having preference for Liquid transactions. I think ultimately, inter-exchange for LN, there's going to either have to be user restrictions as to how much they could pull off the exchange, because otherwise any well-liquidated arbitrage trader is going to want to take out that whole channel out on you, and probably more so if they could find an alternate route. So I think there's going to be a combination of controls in place with user withdrawal limits, and perhaps these exchanges having giant wumbo channels that are private between each other so that the routes aren't necessarily advertised 100%.
So
whereas with Liquid, as long as you're on Liquid and the exchanges support Liquid, it may take longer to swap out to the good stuff, real on-chain BTC. However, you might be able to fulfill a arbitrage opportunity much quicker and at a much bigger scale too. So I think there's some nuances. I think at a certain level, the smaller level, I think Ryan is right up to a certain amount that arbitrage is better via LN. However, you get to a certain size of transaction that might not be possible or limited by the exchanges in that arbitrage swap that might force you onto Liquid. It's going to be real interesting to see both in action on more exchanges than just Bitfinex.
The only counter that I have to that is that you got it. Like it's not just those two in a vacuum, right? You also got to think about using, although we don't like to acknowledge them, Ethereum rails, Tron rails, Algorand rails, Solana rails, etc. Right? These traders don't give a shit. They just want value to move from Bitfinex to Kraken, and they want it to happen fast. So, it's going to be really interesting. I don't, I have my suspicions of what will win out. I'm obviously incredibly biased, so take that with a grain of salt. But it's going to be really interesting. I'm really excited that we're going to have the opportunity now to see, how kind of Lightning fares, in that type of an environment. I hope it fares well.
So,
yeah, me too.
I want to jump in here really fast to kind of respond to Shinobi myself. So I had brought him on in late 2019 on one of my Lightning Sucks episodes because I like to troll with my episode name sometimes. And this was when I was kind of unclear on his position because he was, kind of poo-pooing Lightning at the time. I'm not sure he has the exact same position at this point. But I guess the question that comes up to me, because at the time when we had that conversation, no exchange had adopted Lightning yet. It was kind of like this, we hope one day that they'll adopt it. Will they adopt it? Won't they adopt it ever? Who knows? And now, obviously, at this point, things have changed where some have adopted it, others are in the process of doing it, etc. So how many major exchanges, have adopted Lightning versus adopted Liquid? Because maybe I'm wrong, someone please correct me, but it seems like Lightning has actually been adopted more widely than Liquid has. Like I remember Liquid, like Kraken was saying that they were going to, like they were part of the first group that said they might support Liquid in like 2017, 2016 or something. But they, obviously didn't do that right away. And so it seems like they might actually implement Lightning first, get Lightning working first before Liquid. So like what's the incentive on Kraken's side? I could only guess that Lightning is the new hotness. It's easier to market. It sounds cooler. It's what all the plebs are fucking with. None of the plebs, as far as I know, or a very small amount of the plebs are, being like Liquid fanboys. I think it's so much easier to be a Lightning fanboy in that same sense, being a Lightning fanboy myself. And so, well, Shinobi is saying Lightning is less useful for large liquidity movements, and I don't disagree. But I guess the question is about who's adopting Lightning now versus adopting Liquid, and it seems to be they're adopting Lightning even if it's ill-advised overall. Maybe I'm wrong about that.
Well, I mean, that seems to be like the biggest problem with Liquid. It's not as many participants on board at the moment. Surely it's got a whole bunch of upsides in not having to worry about the same liquidity issues and channels. It's got more publicly locked up money in it as it stands now, at least. But it does have a massive downside in the federation model versus the multi-sig model of Lightning channels. So yeah, it's tricky. Like, what are the real incentives? I mean, I think it's really going to come down to user and customer requests, like big arbitrators like wanting to see it on those exchanges first and foremost. But I could also see that like going alongside demand for the tokens that get offered up on Liquid. I think that's another big benefit that doesn't get mentioned as much. And it was sort of crazy to see at Bitcoin 2021 in Miami this year to see the new NFT platform that the Blockstream guys put out, and like big companies such as like Playboy even having auctions on that. So that was sort of nutty to see. Yeah, basically, I definitely see the plebs as being much more, Lightning focused, and I think everyone is just trying to get that out the door now. But with Liquid, the other huge thing that people are not taking into account is that Liquid is going to be much easier for these exchanges to potentially integrate. There's no channel management, right? It's blocks. They work just like any other, shitcoin asset that might be listed on these shitcoin casinos, right? The blocks come in on time and they process the transactions out of the block, essentially. There's no public channel graph or transactions that are recorded that are not on the chain per se. So I think there's going to be a big rush to, and like a lot of engineering focus is happening right now for these exchanges to get LN out the door. But after that happens, I don't know. Maybe Liquid will follow suit, and people really want to take advantage of doing those big ARB plays. Like maybe, ARB between LN works to a certain extent within those limits, but those big ARB trades are still happening over Liquid. That's how I foresee it happening. But again, we'll see. It's going to take a lot of people to buy in. Whether Kraken does it, I don't know. Maybe. But I really am just pushing forward to get LN out the door there. I think that's where our priority is, at least on my team.
Well, really quick, Evan, I just think there are deeper incentives here beyond just the liquidity dynamics. And I think that factors into liquid just being better for much more massive amounts of liquidity. I think a lot of these big platforms just don't want to risk plugging into something that makes it much easier for their current customers to move liquidity around to other platforms. And then
To
two,
get
I
out.
think in the
Yeah,
long term, I think they're worried about the possibility of all the types of financial products and constructs you can build directly on Liquid itself, which again becomes another competitor they don't want to lose liquidity to. That's pretty much what I think is going on with the lagging Liquid adoption.
I could see that. I definitely understand argument number one you listed there. Keep everyone on your rails, keep everyone on your platform's rails and only have offerings there, But I don't like that argument because, the easier you make it get out, you can make it, even easier to get in through depositing through LN. So that argument, I could go either way on really. The latter, where they're worrying that the financial products on Liquid being built, I'm not sure that anyone's even looking that far down the line, honestly, as far as like execs go. But I don't know, maybe I could be wrong. Certainly, that's got to be a factor in there somewhere. But honestly, I think the biggest decision driving this all is the communities and the usage of these platforms. You know what I mean? Like maybe there's one other Liquid wallet or product that it's out there that's not made by Blockstream, and that's it. Whereas the Lightning has like countless different products being built around it. Like let's look back at the nodes that are offered up. Right? We said 5 out of the 6 they offer up Lightning on the products. Right? That's because they're seeing people who want to use it and run their own Lightning nodes. Not a single one of those 6 pre-built node offerings offers up a Liquid node yet.
I had like kind of a like maybe a really like noob question, but my question is like, okay, so if you're using Lightning to run arbitrage trades like ARB, don't you need like another asset or like another like thing that you're like arbing, or is it merely just like moving Bitcoin between platforms to take advantage of like prices on other markets? So it's like really just like it's like exclusively like Bitcoin arb.
Yeah, but once you get to the other side, you'll switch it for the other base asset, whatever the dollars, and buy them cheaper on the other exchange. So yeah, there definitely has to be another asset in the mix there, right? But it's really just looking at like the cost and speed of transferring that Bitcoin from destination A to destination B. So yeah, there's definitely has to be a different asset that the price is denominated in to make that ARB opportunity.
Yeah, and there's also like one thing that has happened post March 12th last year is that like it used to be all the major derivative pairs were BTC denominated, like especially when BitMEX was the dominant venue for derivatives. And now like almost all of them are Tether denominated instead. I think all the derivative pairs on FTX, on OKX, on Wobi, on maybe Kraken too. I don't know about that one. I would have to double check that one. Are all Tether now. So yeah, like with that being, if that's really the case, and that's why again, Tether on Tron has exploded so much, because it's like when you need to rebalance, like the ARB and the spot markets is, if there's a $5 difference between the Coinbase price BTC USD and like the Kraken one, you want to sell on the higher exchange and buy on the lower one, right? And pocket that spread. But in the derivatives markets, like it may be that your margin on one exchange, the amount that you're borrowing for your position is like much different than the amount you have on another one. And this is why and talking to traders about this, the way they think about it is I need to like rebalance my margin, rebalance my positions across exchanges to make sure that like my risk is even, and I'm not like in a super risky position on exchange A, but like in a really healthy position on exchange B and C, right? Because they have to trade on these different venues. And so I like obviously we talk about rebalancing and Lightning like all the time. And so I've always liked that kind of parallel. Whether that means anything or not, I don't know. But definitely right now with like derivatives, which is I think a much more urgent use case for speed of settlement across exchanges. It's all Tether, and so Lightning being kind of Bitcoin only there is probably a limiting factor for sure.
Is it time for us to turn on RGB and start putting Tether onto RGB?
No comment on RGB. I hope that they keep pushing and then it works. I've been excited about it for a long time, but we'll see. I don't think things are going very well.
Understood there. So we're just about to touch 2 hours here. I do have a hard stop basically right then, so we're going to have to kind of end things there. Did we have any final questions from the audience or any of the speakers before we close things up?
I have a question for you, Chaz.
Engage.
Can it be non-lightning related?
If you want, sure.
What color is your hair?
Why'd you have to ask that? I do not have hair. Is that easier? Okay, no.
Yeah. Yes.
At the
No, I don't
conference-
want to dox you either.
That's true.
Yeah. So answer, don't answer. Either way, we're good.
I had very interesting hair for the conference, let's say. Probably a different color than most people would expect me to have. So yeah, I'll say that.
Okay. That was a good enough answer for me. Thank you, Chaz.
Oh, you're welcome. All right. So should I take that as we don't have any other lightning talk to go through here?
I just want to state for the record, all I wanted to do was troll Ryan with one statement, and you made it serious.
My bad, dude.
It was pretty good discussion. I actually like the LN versus Liquid discussion. There's a lot of subtleties to it.
Sorry, Shinobi, but your autism will not win today.
Oh man. Wow, what another great week. Yeah, thanks to everyone who joined us today. A lot of great questions. Really happy to get Ryan Gentry in. Thanks, Ryan, for giving us a whole bunch of your time.
Thanks to Ryan.
Thanks for having us.
Yeah, every week. That's the plan. Trying to stay on our toes and change it up a little bit every week. But yeah, we've been happy with how it's been going. Got some great co-hosts. Be sure to check out Lightning Junkies for your Lightning Network podcasts. Chaz has had a whole bunch of excellent ones lately. And be sure to check out amboss.space. That is the premier Lightning Network Graph Explorer out right now. It's excellent. I've been using it a whole bunch. So check that out. And yeah, for my stuff, check out the Zeus LN app if you want to take your fully sovereign Lightning node that you're running at home or maybe elsewhere on the go with you. It's for Android and iOS. That's ZeusLN.app. And yeah, I think that's it.
Just to note, I am unbiased and I use Zeus Wallet as well. It isn't just a self shill on Evan's part there.
Yeah, no worries. A lot of big stuff is coming out. New release is going to have LN URL channel support. I'm pretty sure most people are aware we're doing a giant redesign this summer. Hoping to get that out in September. Maybe it'll be our 1.0 release. I don't know. But we're really looking forward to all the changes there. And a couple new features that will be coming alongside with that too. So hope you guys check it out.
Do you have anything to shill on your end, Justifer?
I just want to say thanks for hosting this. This went really smoothly for Twitter Spaces. Yeah, looking forward to next week. Get prepared for your big difficulty adjustment.
We're going to open up so many channels tonight. So many channels. It's going to be an excellent Lightning Friday. It already has been.
The fireworks will come early on the Lightning Network.
Yes, let's maybe set off a couple early. We'll see.
And Ryan, I'm sorry, I cut you off. Did you have something to say?
Oh no, I was just going to say thanks for hosting. This was a lot of fun. And yeah, y'all, everybody have a good 4th. I guess for the Americans, have a good 4th.
Absolutely. We'll wish everyone a 4th of July that celebrates that. I'll shill very quickly myself to say in 2 weeks, I'm going to release the Rusty Rustle and Fiat Jaff episode, off the cuff episode. So look out for that. But for now, I'll see all you lovely folks on the Lightning Network.
Peace. Girthy channels.
Peace.
Penis.
Terrible. Computer end program.